All right, we're going to live stream to YouTube.
Okay.
And maybe
Can you
we'll
see
put that,
my?
drop that.
How does it look from my desktop now?
So I can't. Nope. I'm still seeing. I'm just seeing a black screen.
I wonder what that's all
So
about.
what did you share that time?
I got the whole desktop shared.
Yeah.
Let me check the screen.
Let me, if I mute this here, I'm assuming it's not going to mute for other people. I was getting a weird feedback, and I was like, "What is that?" And it's like I'm live streaming. Well, I want to let me unmute. So can I just close the screen, or let's see, will I still be?
Yeah, so I'm on a single monitor here, so it may just be the nuance of that.
Try sharing the. Just try sharing a single application like your terminal.
Okay, hold on just a second. Okay.
So I wonder if can I just close this window?
So can you see the document?
No, I can't. I wonder. Let me do fiddle around with my end. Maybe it's something weird on mine. And
Yeah, I mean, it's got me screen sharing.
no, I'm playing with all, just resizing everything, and yeah, I don't know what that could be.
Right,
I really like you to
and
drive,
going
but I
back
guess
in.
yeah, try it one more time maybe.
Yeah, I got the desktop sharing.
Well, we'll spend some more time. I'll go ahead and drive this first session, and then
Okay. Yeah, I'll go do some homework at my end as well. And
yeah,
maybe
maybe do some experimenting.
Yeah.
Well, you really need, I don't know. You may want to record your screen. It'd be interesting to have you record your screen and do a recording and see if you can see it. I guess you need to pair with somebody else to see if they can see your share or not. So anyway,
Right.
Well, I'll drive this session.
Okay.
So I'm going to share my desktop. Okay. So we're live on YouTube. No, I'm sure no one's watching us, but whatever. The recording, I think that's the way live works. The recording will be there. So what we're going to do today is get started on our first steps with our RecruitTracker, aka internally maybe known, depending on who you ask, as the FNG tracker. You can add Jerome Hardaway on Twitter, and he can tell you what FNG stands for. Okay, so I think what we should do today, Greg, is use. Have you used scaffolding in Rails before?
I mean, I've created a Rails app, and that's
well. And when I say
like
scaffolding,
the extent of it. So
yeah, scaffolding is a specific generator. I guess that's the way I should say it. Scaffolding is a general term as far as like scaffolding of code, but Rails has a specific scaffolding generator that allows you to add. You know, I apologize for eating my snack on while we live streaming code, but it is what it is, as I say.
yeah,
but scaffolding is a specific generator, and so that's just a nice, easy way to start. And for something like this user model that we're going to build out. Now, that being said, though, let me back up.
So I don't recall ever using that scaffolding generator.
Well, Yeah, and you may not have. It's possible you have not. And if you want to follow along, let's do this. And this is one of the great things about Rails too, is it's easy to just test stuff out. So we're just going to create in fact, we'll go back to our, I don't know if you've got it, if you've saved it. We've got our sandbox app that we created, I think in week 1, and maybe we called it test app, I think. So I'm going to open this up and you can see, well, you know what, I'm going to go back and can I open our live streaming up? Yeah, there it is. Let me mute this and then let's put this over here.
Test app is what I have.
Yeah, you had that. Yeah.
I do.
And I think just to review, we did controllers. Yeah, we created a hello controller. And I think we had a single, action. And I thought, didn't we create one where we created a blarg action too? I can't remember where we did that at. Maybe we did a different one. Anyway, let's look at, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought it was in there as well.
Yeah, I don't remember where we did that, but let's, I'll show you scaffolding real quick. And I'm sure you did, if you did like another little class in Rails, I'm sure you probably did use scaffolding. You just may not recall it, but anyway, and you can follow along at home too. So we can do Rails G scaffold. So the convention we use when using scaffolding in Rails is the model name. So we're going to do task. And then we follow that up with the fields or attributes we want that model to have. And again, this is just, so the idea here was like, we're going to create a to-do app, you know, or a task app is what I like to call it. So a task is going to have a name. Now, the convention here is we can specify the data type as we create each attribute, or if you leave it blank, it's a string by default. Okay. So name, we can leave that as a string. We can say maybe completion, date, and then so we can do date there. We can do completed. Maybe we've got a completed field, and that's going to be Boolean. And let's make sure I'm not lying. I don't do these every day, so let's do something like Rails scaffold generator. Make sure I got my types right. Rails scaffold generator, data types, yeah. There we go. Yeah, Boolean. So these are the various.
Yep. Okay.
These are the various, and I just want to make sure I couldn't remember if it was bool or I had in my head.
So you have completion data there?
Completion, yeah, that should be date. And which is another important point. It's really good not to screw these up, because again, and I think I mentioned this last time, it's just a pain in the butt to go back and fix it after the fact. Just a little bit. So generally what I'll do, I'll be honest with you, generally, and we'll see this when we create the live, when we actually do the recruiter app, when we're sort of doing some of the work there, I'll often take, and when I'm doing scaffolding like this, and put it in a text document or a text editor first, and really look at it and maybe even share it with somebody else. You know, that's why pairing is nice, just to sanity check it, because again, if you, just a little typo like that, you've got multiple files in multiple places where that typo is going to exist. Now, again, it's not the end of the world to go in and modify it or change it after the fact. But it is a pain in the tail to just sort of run.
It still takes some work to go.
Yeah, right. And so you
root
really
all that
want to
stuff out, right?
Yeah, right. So if you really want to get it right, if you can, when you and just do it one time. Let's throw another. It's always interesting to see the difference. And let's see, we got a completion date, which is date. So we're making that a date. Let's do. I'm just trying to think of something. Let's just do.
Is there a way to number these tasks? Maybe
Oh, okay. I see. Well.
Or will that just come through?
Well, we're going to get, there's a database ID is going to be assigned to it. So that's sort of.
That's what I figured. Okay.
Yeah. But let's do date. Let's do a date time too, just so we can see the difference in those. Let's do a text fields. We can do description. And then is it text? Field. Why am I not seeing there's text? I'm almost sure there's text field. Field.
So it looks like those are SQL would post. Yeah, okay. Postgres what they have. Yeah, it says there field name.
Yeah, well, it should be a text. We should be able to do a text field. And I'm just looking because there's text or there's string. Oh, I'm sorry. It is actually, yeah, text is what it is. Let me make sure that's right. Yeah, text is what I'm sorry. Yeah. So string is 256 characters, I think. And then a text field is, I can't remember what the upper limit of it is. We could go look it up if we wanted to. But anyway, a text field is generally like a paragraph size box. I'm not sure what the limit is, but I think it's pretty big, pretty high. But this will just be a good example for us to be able to run and see. So let's just sanity check this again. Rails G scaffold task. That's going to be the model name. And then these are going to be all the fields here. So in this case, we've got name, which is going to be a string. Again, I could explicitly put :string there and it would be a string, but I can leave it blank if I want, or I can just not pass that argument and it'll make it a string. So we'll just leave it that way. So name is string. Completion date is going to be a date object. Completed is going to be Boolean field. Test date, just so we can sort of see what it looks like, is going to be a date time. And then description is going to be a text field.
And then, so if I don't have the colon and the specific field, it defaults to a string, you said,
yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Copy.
100%.
Oh, and it builds out everything here, right?
So, right. So what the scaffolding does, so if you remember, we ran a single generator for a controller.
Right.
Previous to this, we got a very limited set of things. We got the controller and the view. So what scaffolding does is it gives you the model view and the controller. So it's sort of a very I'm making a sphere with my hands here. It sort of gives you the whole deal in one shot.
Yeah. Okay.
And so we could run our app and look at it. We're not ready to do that yet. So we've created, and also note, we get a migration file here too. Yeah, so notice we get a migration file. We'll take a look at that. We get some test fixtures and things. We haven't even talked about testing any yet, but since we're actually going to do a production app, we need to don't let me forget that, because I want to, but for our RecruitTracker, we want to add some tests to it. We get our full ensemble of views, and we got our task controller. We get a style sheet. So it gives us all these goodies. So let's look at them over here. So now if I go to my controller, I've got a task controller. So notice also here, we get all of these actions. So notice previously,
wow.
when we explicitly ran the generator to create a controller for us, we specified the action that we wanted. Scaffolding gives us default 7 actions, I think it is, which they sort of fit the CRUD model: the create, read, update, and create, read, update, and delete actions. So this gives us index, show, new, edit, create, update, destroy, and then we've got our before action here, which has its own history, which I won't, which would be outside of the scope of our conversation. That was added, I think, in Rails 4, maybe. But anyway, yeah. So it gives us all these goodies. Views. So we go to our task view. Gives us all of our views that are associated with those: index, edit, new, show. And then let's look at our migration file too. Why am I not seeing? Why am I not seeing it in my migration file? Okay, right. No, right. Okay, right. It gives us our task. Yeah, I was expecting to see an initial other migration files, but yeah, when we created this app initially, this is the first time we've done any database work. We only created a controller up to this point. We didn't have any models, so that's why we've only got a single model. And so you can see essentially what you see here, this name, completion date, right? Those are all the attributes we passed in when we did our scaffolding. And then the data types, string, date, time, Boolean text. Those are, again, those are just things we passed in there. Now we can go in and modify these and change these. The scaffolding that we used, you know, again, I'll go back here and just hit the up arrow. You know, this scaffolding we used here, it's just basically a quick cheat sheet way to do it, and it just generates all this code for us. But we can go in and modify this if we decide we want the description to be a string field instead of text. We can just go in and change this to t dot string. And the other thing is, if we didn't want to use this scaffolding at all, if we wanted to go in and manually create all of these files, we could go in and just, you know, create individual files and insert, you know, the code that we want to get these things to work.
So in this file here, I've got tables and rows, or columns and rows, sorry.
Tables and columns, it would be, right?
Columns.
Rows is the actual.
And then as we put the data in, those are become the rows there?
I'm trying to think. Yeah, it depends on how we want to lay it out. But well, the safe way to explain it is that the task in this case is the table name, and then these are attributes of that table.
Okay.
I mean, when I think of rows, I think of actually inserting data into it. We're not inserting any data yet, but. Okay, so we've got our migration file. Now we actually need to run this migration file to actually create this table. Again, nothing's been done in the actual database yet. We've just created the schema for it here. You know, we've just created the requirements or the definition of what we want the table to look like. So we'll run Rails DB : migrate. And it's going to do its thing. Okay. Now we can actually run, we'll run our server and actually look at it. So if you remember, we never actually set our routes up. We haven't did anything with our default routes. So we'll go to tasks. So then again, this is just sort of default layout view, HTML, you know, stuff that you get. And we can see here, we haven't added any data yet, but we can see our tasks table, and then we can see the various attributes that we created across the top here. We can add a new task. So now we can go in here. And then notice the difference in the date and the date time, which makes sense, right? I mean, date time just gives us just gives us a time stamp, you know, in addition to a simple date. Notice we've got our Boolean field here. Rails knows that, or by default, Rails gives us a checkbox for a Boolean field.
Yeah, okay.
You know, it could be a true false, or, you know, again, this is just sort of the front end, right? We go in and make the front end look like we want, but just sort of out of the box for free. Rails says, okay, since it's a Boolean field, I'm going to make it a checkbox by default. Our date, and then notice our description field is this text area, and again, just based on the date, the data type, it being a text field or a text data type, it gives you this field here.
Yeah, that's cool. Just out of the box packaging. That's
right.
That's
and
impressive.
you know, for the most part, it works, right? I mean, especially for what we're doing for the RecruitTracker, this is excellent. You know, for admin, especially for admin backend type apps that you're going to build. Like most of the time, you know, you're not really worried about the layout and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you want it to be in some logical way, but if it's very much sort of data management type of stuff, a lot of what Rails gives you out of the box is fine. Okay, so we can do create task, and then it gives us, you know, we can see our task there. And so,
okay.
So these, let me make a couple of points about our views here. So yeah, we're in our views here. So this is, let's look at the corresponding views for each one of these. So for instance, our index view is here, right? And so if I go to the index view, you've got an index.html.erb. And what we're seeing here is what we're seeing on cool. This page. Our new task, when we click new, is our new.html.erb. Now notice we've got what's called partials in Rails, and these are basically snippets of code that are reused inside views. So you notice in this case, we're rendering this form view, which is this underscore form here. So this underscore form is actually the majority of what we're seeing here. And the reason that they're sort of reused. So the other convention Rails uses for partials, these partials start with an underscore. So notice these have underscores. So from a development standpoint, visually, I can just look at that file, and when I see the underscore, leading underscore, I know it's a partial or a shared template. And then if we go to new, notice when it's called on the render side, though, notice the underscore is not there. So just don't let that fool you. Yep. A lot of people will try to reuse a partial and they'll use the actual name, but Rails strips out the underscore. All it's looking for is the name. And so like that's the new view. If we do show, so I can click show and I can look at an existing record that's been added. So this is the show view. Edit is the edit view. And again, I'm reusing that underscore form. So this is a case where I could hard code everything that's in this inside the new and the edit form, but I'm sort of, you know, Rails has this dry, what it likes to call a dry principle DRY, which is do not repeat yourself. So the idea here is if we were to add a new field, we could do it via a migration. Well, we would do it via a migration file, but when we go in to edit the views, you know, we've just got a single place that we would add a new field here, but it would automatically show up inside both the edit and the new views.
Okay.
Okay. So that is scaffolding. Any questions or observations about that?
It's powerful.
It is very,
and it seems like it's undoing is probably the hardest part of this. Is like get it right the first time, or
yeah, and
hate yourself for not doing it. Right?
You know, right? Yeah, and it's you know, when you get into Rails development deep, like you actually in some ways you rarely touch scaffolding. Like you do it one time, right? I mean, if you're a consultant, right, you're out there creating new apps every week, or for like me, from a training standpoint or a teaching standpoint, you're doing it a whole bunch. You're doing it a lot. But for a typical you know, I'm hesitant to say, but I think that's probably right. For typical Rails dev, you actually don't touch, you know, if you're a Rails dev working on a legacy sort of a enterprise app, you don't touch scaffolding much, I would say, or, you know, it's not uncommon for, you know, for you not to use scaffolding a whole lot. But it is nice, again, just knowing it's there and being able to use it. So anyway, we'll certainly use that some for our app. Back to our recruit tracker. Go ahead.
I was just agreeing there.
Okay, it just occurred to me just when we started this up, I was ready to maybe use some scaffolding to create, to get started with our user model. However, we need to think about authentication, and because that's going to depend. So we could go in right now and create a recruit model or a user model, and we could do something very similar to what we did here with our scaffolding, and just do Rails G user, Rails G scaffold user, and then we said, you know, just as a good starting point, we're going to grab everything that new recruits do when they apply. So we could do Rails G scaffold user, first underscore name, last underscore name, email, zip codes, city, state, blah, 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 on and on and on. And that would give us, you know, that would give us something similar to what we just looked at here with our tasks, and we'd be able to track folks. However, we're going to be using authentication with this app, right? Authentication is obviously going to be very important. We need to track, I mean, users need to create an account. They need to be able to log in. And to do that, I think we're going to want to use devise to do that. So let's have a conversation about that, what our options are. Okay. Our options are to use devise. I mean, there's other authentication methods out there. There's some latest and greatest newer stuff, I think, where you can use, you know, Amazon, I think, has like incognito. Are you familiar with that? I think, like, I know people are using that, and it's like this great cloud service. And I mean, there's all kinds of advantages to it, but we're going to keep it simple, and we're going to stick with sort of tried and true ways of doing things. And, you know, if somebody's motivated enough at some point to go out, we can always change the authentication method, or, you know, if you want, but we're going to stick with the Rails way of doing things, which means we have two options. We're going to either use the devise gem for authentication, or we're going to roll our own authentication, which is, and I did this in my book, and the name's not coming to me, but I'll tell you in about 2 seconds right now. Ryan Bates, who is famous in the Rails world. Gosh, let's see, users and authentication. 263. I think auth from scratch is sort of the term it's became known as, and basically it's based off a single screencast that Ryan Bates did probably over a decade ago now. But I think auth from scratch was what the screencast was, and people just started, you know, people just picked up on it. And so those are two. I won't see that. Those are not by any stretch the only two options folks use for Rails authentication, but they're two very popular options folks use. And for what we're going to do, that they are the only options that we're going to consider. So let's have a conversation. Now's a good time to have a conversation about the pros and cons of each of those things. So let's talk about the devise gem first. So devise is, again, a very popular gem for authentication in Rails apps. I mean, very common to see it. And, you know, I wouldn't be able to give you a percentage of how many Rails apps out there that use auth, but again, it's from an authentication standpoint, it's probably the most popular gem. I think I'm fair. I'm okay in saying that's the most popular authentication gem. So the advantages of using, and some of this conversation will be just overall, gems in general have advantages associated and with them and disadvantages associated with them. So some of this is a broader conversation about Ruby gems and your Rails apps, but and then some of them, some of them are going to be specific to the devise gem. So the advantages are that it's just going to take care of a lot of stuff for us. And I mean, what we're going to do is, if we have time, we'll see how much time we have, is we're just going to, in fact, we can do it with our sandbox app we've got here. We'll add authentication and we'll add the devise gem to that and just sort of test it out and see what we think. And as maybe some homework offline will be for us to create, and I need to go through it again because it's been a few years since I've done it, but to use auth from scratch, create an app and add auth from scratch to it and just see what we like. But the advantages to a gem is, again, it's going to take care of a lot of stuff for us. It's got a lot of stuff baked into it. So think about all the things around authentication, right? Not only creating users, the sign up, the typical web sign up process that you have, creating, adding your email, a username, creating a password, being able to apply authentication to certain pages. Some pages you're going to want public and you're going to want anybody to see, so you don't want auth on those pages. You do want authentication on certain other pages, so you have to have a way to do that and a way to manage that. Being able to reset your password, getting email notifications. When you create a user account, you get an email notification. When you reset your password, your email has to be able to handle that. So that's all code you have to write, and
yeah, right.
devise gives you all of that stuff out of the box. Now there's some configuration, and we'll see that depending on if we use it or not. It's not quite, you just don't quite snap your fingers and do it, but I mean, it takes care of a lot of the code for you. It's just more of a configuration options. If you remember, we talked about the initializers as sort of when you're configuring your Rails app, there's an initializer section. Well, devise gives you an initializer file. So a lot of that stuff's just a matter of going in and modifying that file and either turning things on or off inside that initializer file, depending on if you want it or not. Those are the advantages. The disadvantages are, well, in fact, in our case with this app, we're creating authentication, but then if you remember, we said we're also going to, we want to add all these fields, and these are maybe not typical fields that that a user would add when they create an account, right? I mean, typically, the very basic level authentication, the most basic is just an email address and a password, right? But in addition to that, we're getting first name, last name, email, branches of service, GitHub username. We've got a dozen or more fields here that we're going to want to sort of make devise work with. I mean, devise is going to give us a user model, and we're going to want to add these in addition to, again, at the most basic level, the username and password that devise is going to force us to use, just so somebody will be able to log in and authenticate. We're going to want to hang these other attributes off the user model. Devise gives you a method to do that, but again, you're starting to get outside of the box, outside of what the sort of intended purpose of the gem was. So there's some pain there. So now let's talk about auth from scratch. Using the auth from scratch method, you're creating your own. We're going to use scaffolding the same way we use scaffolding to create a task here. We're going to use scaffolding to create a user model. We're going to give it we're going to give it the specific attributes we want. So in addition to a username and a password, we'll probably have an email address too. We're going to go in and add last name, first name, all the other attributes we want. So there's sort of less moving parts there. Well, and that's sort of, yeah, well, I don't know that. And again, so that's the debate. I say there's less moving parts. In some ways, there's more moving parts, but we know what all the moving parts are. We're writing the code for every moving part. So the advantage is that we sort of know, devise is a very sophisticated gem, and there's a lot of wiring under the covers. And I know in my experience, I've done both. I've written apps where I've used auth from scratch, and I've used devise. And what I've ran into with the devise, you know, views is another thing. The login screens and things like that, the registration screens for devise, there's just a bunch of hoops you have to jump through to be able to modify those things. So the disadvantages are that you sort of, you know, and again, I'm hesitant to put this out loud because I feel like there's some Rails devs that are going to hear me and are going to sort of cringe when they hear me say it. But you can get stuck in devise hell or gem hell, trying to modify things and make it do things that are not. Again, if it's very if your needs are very straightforward from an authentication standpoint, and hey, all I need is, you know, I want somebody to enter a username and a password, and I sort of keep things simple, devise is great. And I don't want to say it's not great for even more sophisticated things, but you really get into the guts of the gem if you start getting outside the box of what it normally does. So those, you know, those are the sort of those are the things to think about. Enough chit chat. Let's write some code. So let's look at the devise gem. So again, if you're following along at home, and Greg, you should do this too. And so you guys can watch what I'm doing here. I'm just going to Google Rails devise gem. And generally, at least years ago when I've done this, just going to the GitHub repo, devise has pretty good sort of get you started stuff.
Yeah, okay.
So let's go. So getting started, that's where I'm going to start. And
so question here is, so the difference between looking at this on rubygems.org versus the GitHub, I mean, I guess the code is stored on GitHub, so that should be where I go.
Well, we want some instructions on how to use it, and GitHub is where that's going to be. I mean, Ruby Gems is, well, I to be honest, I don't go to Ruby Gems a ton, so I don't know what all Ruby Gems has there. But generally, the GitHub and the wiki pages and the README is where, you know, the sort of boots on the ground install instructions are, which is what we want. All righty, so we're just gonna, and this will be a good test of how good their README is. We're just gonna go to the getting started section and follow the instructions. So the first thing it says, first devise 4 works with Rails 4 and up, so we're good there. On Rails 6, we're gonna add the following to our gem file. So I'm just gonna copy it, and I'm gonna go to my, gem file. And I'm going to post it in right here. All righty, now it says run bundle install. So let's run bundle install. So I'm just going to run bundle. Remember, bundle install is the same thing. Okay, that went pretty quick. Devise. I just always like to see. Okay, yeah. So here you can see it listed and installed. Devise. And
so it grabbed a bunch of other dependencies that
in addition, in fact,
when it got that one, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say get status. I don't think we did add this, but so if I do get diff gemfile.lock, so there's devise. Yeah, and I think it added right. I think this is the little section here.
Yeah, there it is.
bcrypt, ORM, Rails ties, rail ties. Warden, I know for sure. Like bcrypt and Warden are. I think they're safe to say they're authentication type gems, but they're very low level. Like they're very low level gems, and devise, you know, builds on top of those things. Okay. All righty. Rails generate devise install. So this actually, let me make sure. Yeah. Okay. So let's just run that, paste it in, and run it. Okay. Did some stuff. Let's see what it did. Yeah, so it only created 2 files for us. So here's our initializer file that I talked about, and we'll take a quick peek at that. And then there's a there's a locales file, which is like internationalization stuff, I think. And then it's got some instructions for us there. Let's see what I think Jerome is trolling us in. Okay, whatever. He asks for he said bootstrap in Slack, which I'm guessing he's talking about front end frameworks and views, but we're not. We've got a while before we get to that. Let's look at our devise initializer, which is devise.rb config initializers. So this is what the initializer looks like. All kinds of goodies, and basically you can uncomment these things. So if there's something you want to turn on, config password after reset, and this is pretty handy. They sort of tell you what each one does. When set to false, does not sign a user in automatically after their password is reset, defaults to true, so the user. So if you want this option, you can uncomment that. So we're just going to leave everything in place as defaults here, but there's all kinds of goodies here. Again, the sky's the limit. So we're not going to touch any of that right now. Okay, we did that. At this point, let's see, I'm just reading from the instructions here in the GitHub. At this point, a number of instructions will appear in the console. Yep, we saw those. Among these instructions, you'll need to set your default URL option for the devise mailer inside here. Okay, we're not worried about the mailer yet. And again, the mailer handles things like when someone registers, do you want to get an email? They want to reset their password, set up mail options and things like that. Again, we're not going to worry about that. Rails Devise model. So this is going to allow us to actually create our model. So again, we're going to use user as our model here. It could be anything we wanted. If we want to call it, we might want to call it recruit, something like that. But again, based on our earlier conversations, we decided that recruits, are going to be students, are going to be mentors, are going to be admins. So we're just going to stick with user as a very general model for anybody who uses the app. And then we could create a roles table or something like that, or some roles settings after the fact if we want to be able to distinguish different user types. Okay, so I'm going to do Rails devise. So I'm going to paste that in Rails G devise, and then we're going to do user. And again, notice that a lot of gems will follow this Rails generate convention. Right out of the box, Rails has generators for controls and things like that, but then a lot of secondary apps might have their own generators, again following the same paradigm.
Yeah, I have a question here before you hit
code.
it too.
Okay, go ahead.
Is this convention capitalized, not capitalized, plural versus singular?
Capitalization, I think I'm safe in saying this, does not matter. You can make it uppercase if you wanted to, but that doesn't affect anything. Now, plural versus singular does matter, and I always screw it up, so I'm not going to try to tell you what it is for sure. I know for the models, I'm 90% sure that it's singular, which is what we're going to use here. And I always get confused about controllers, maybe. I think one of them is plural, maybe, but I'm almost sure enough that I'm just going to go ahead and do it here. That,
yeah, I got homework on that then.
Models, yeah. Well, and you can, like I said, I've tried to remember in the past, but again, I just do it seldom enough that I can never keep it straight in my head. So I usually look at documentation if I'm actually ready to do it. So in this case, we're going with singular though. We're going to call it user. So let's just hit it. Okay, pretty straightforward, right? Not, you would think there'd be more to it than this, but it's actually not that bad. Let's look at our migration files. A good place to start though. Notice we got a devise, create users, migration file. So let's look at that. Devise, create users. Okay. So again, we noticed based on our scaffolding earlier, we've got an idea of what this is. So we're creating a users table, and then of course the uncommented stuff we're not going to be using. So we've got an email, we've got an encrypted password. We've got a reset password token, reset password sent at, remember created at, and then some indexes are set to, and then some timestamps are set. So the important ones are the email and the password, right? I'm not even going to pretend to tell. I could probably think about it and guess what the reset password token and all these other things are, but I mean, just, yeah, I guess, yeah. When you do reset your password, this field is used to store the reset password token, and then the time, I think, when you reset your password, we probably need to look in the initializer file would tell us, but there's a time frame that this password token is good for. So you have to reset it within 10 minutes or an hour. Again, I don't know what but anyway, these fields are used to store that information when someone resets their password. And then the rememberable, I think, you've got, when you log in on a password screen, you've got the remember me checkbox. I think I'm assuming, I'm guessing that's what this does, is when you check that, depending on the date and time that it's there, it's going to update this field. And then let's look at the user model. So that's going to be an app models user. Really, in fact, nothing there really, right? I mean, well, I shouldn't say there's nothing there. This stuff's very important, but there's no methods or anything real sophisticated there.
Yeah, but we didn't have that model built until generating now, and then so we'll use the same one as the RecruitTracker grows. That's where we'll start to put all those particular fields, right?
Yep. Yeah. Right. You're absolutely. You're absolutely correct about that. We'll need to update. We'll be updating here, and any, there's going to be methods and things we're going to want to do that are associated with users. All that stuff will live here. In addition to the controller too. And just as a matter of comparison, this is our task. For our task scaffolding we use to create our task. We can see what that looks like, and essentially it's just a task class, a Ruby class that's created, and it's inheriting from application record. Okay. All right. My goal is, before the hour's up, is to let's see if we can log in. All right, Rails, run db : migrate.
And so it's just pushing all those tables up to the, yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Created table, created the users table, added a couple of indexes, and yep, it's done. Controllers, filters, helpers. Okay, we're not going to talk about that. I want to log in and see it work. And let's see if we can routes. Okay, I just want to check too. Notice we got this devise for users. That's going to add all of our, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say all of our devise or authentication related routes. We'll see if that's the case, but so I'm just going to go Rails S. Now, we're not going to see anything in our app itself. Our app itself is going to still work the same way, which sort of on the front end, we had this, we've got our task, and we can create new tasks and do all that. But to be able to actually see it work, it's going to be all essentially route based. So let's see our routes. Figuring views, controllers. First thing I want to do is register. How about this? Let me open another tab. And let me go back to Sandbox, test app, and then I'm going to do Rails routes. So this Rails routes command is often handy to see what's available to me.
Yeah, okay.
And you can see there's a whole bunch of stuff available to us. And okay, so here's our users. So what I'm looking for is all of our devise routes are /users. So I'm looking through here, and I thought I would have a registration. Okay, new user registration, yes, sign up. So I'm looking here and I see this new user registration. I know that that's my sign up route. So I'm going to go /users/sign up. Now, again, notice, out of the box, Rails didn't give us like a nice sign in link up here and a sign out link and all that. We've got to add all that stuff after the fact, but that just is what it is. So all we want to do is test out our sort of the basic authentication, sign up, that kind of thing. So let's test that out now. So I'm going to call this guy foobar. Well, let me do it something so I remember it. Mark Locklear at Gmail. Test. And let's do sign up. Okay, so that's good. I didn't get any errors, but I'd like to go to my console. So I'm gonna go to my console and look. And yeah, I'm not seeing like this was the post. Yeah, post request was sent. We sent off that username, password, all that data. The user here I can see is Mark Locklear Gmail. Notice that Rails is smart enough not to show our passwords. You see filtered here instead. And then, user exists. You can sort of see under the cover some stuff devise is doing. Is checks to see if, when someone's signing up for a new account, you want to make sure that the user doesn't already exist in the database. So user exist, checks that. Nope, that's okay. So we're going to go ahead and create the user. Notice it created the user, and then it gave us a sort of an affirmative response back. So that seems to have worked. How do we test that? Well, let's go back to our routes. Let's actually sign in now. So that would be here, users _ sign in. Okay. So I'm going to go here. And actually, I think it signed me in. So the reason I'm not seeing anything is here is it actually signed me in by default. And I'm wondering if it would have showed us that. Insert in. Welcome controller. Yeah, actually, if you see that here. So by default, when you create a new account, it actually signs you in. So we actually need to sign out. If we want to sort of see the login work, we actually need to sign out first. So let's go to /sign out. Now, I've seen this before. This is an issue with, and it's been years since I've done this, but I actually remember it as an issue before, is that I don't know, there's something weird with the routes that sign out never works out of the box. And it's probably something stupid that I'm missing, but sign _out. I think it's this right here. And let's ask Aunt Google and see what she says. Well, let's check here first and see. Rails, devise, sign out, not working. And let's see, no route actually, because I think that's actually the error we got, right? We did sign out. Yep. Yeah, this is common. I don't know, you'd think this would be one that, hey, just fix it and make it work, but whatever. So I think we need to change sign out delete to sign out get. And so again, we've got about 3 minutes left, so we're just going to make it work. Generally, what I like to do when I'm editing these files is, rather than delete and change something, I like to make a copy of it, comment out the old one, and then change the new one. That way we can sort of go back. Let me make sure. So yeah, we need to change delete to get. Save. And then I think we need to restart our Rails server for that change. Generally, when you change initialization files, like low-level stuff in Rails like this, you generally do need to restart the server when you do that. And then let's go back to our controller. Let's go back here and just make sure this works. Okay, it does. And then let's go sign out again. Okay, so sign out seemed to have worked then. So now let's try our sign in. /users/sign in. Okay, here's that. marklocklear@gmail.com. Test. Login. Yeah. Okay, so it works. Again, we don't see a welcome to your app. We don't see our username up in the top hand corner to let you know you're logged in. We don't see a log out button. Those are all things that it's up to us to do and to configure. But devise has given us a lot of this wiring underneath that we don't have to take care of. So that this is just a quick sort of look into devise. So now what I suggest is either on our own time, or maybe we'll do it Monday of next week or next week, is let's do, that we in about an hour's time, or even 30 minutes, which is what it took us to do, sort of test, kick the tires on the devise gem. We can do the same thing with auth from scratch. And then we'll revisit the pros and cons of each of those. And that will give us a chance to decide what authentication method we want to do. Because as our amazing RecruitTracker app grows, and then again, Bill Gates gets word of it and he wants to give us an award for this great nonprofit work we've done. And it's this huge app. All these authentication pains we're going to have can be, either made worse or made better by whether we choose something like the devise gem or whether we do auth from scratch. And it really, at some point you just have to sort of choose one and go with it. I mean, you can sit around and think about it and hem and haw and scratch your chin and hand wring is what I could call it. We can hand wring about which route we want to go. It's going to be a pain in the tail. If you're building an enterprise level app, you're going to have pain either way you go. So sometimes it's better just, at some point you do have to just bite the bullet and go with it. Another consideration real quick is, we went through the process of updating the remote gig app. And so we looked at, we saw some gems that had updates available to them. Another thing to think about with the devise gem, it has compatibilities with other gems. And when you go to update gems, you have to update that devise gem too, which can cause problems for you. Things can break there. Whereas if we roll all of our own code, we never have to worry about that happening. Now, it's possible. So we are going to be using some underlying gems like bcrypt and other things like that if we roll our own code. So there are some dependencies there, but you're not being dependent on the devise gem itself. And there's advantages to that.
Yeah, I think that out of the box, though, that devise gem is, you got authentication in 20 minutes and the price is right,
Very slick, yeah. And it's just, it's one of those, the other thing is if your app grows to be something great and you say, man, maybe I wish I really would have rolled my own. I mean, that's a good problem to have if your app grows to be bigger.
Absolutely.
And again, you can figure it out. And the other thing is, it's not the end of the world. I mean, it's pain. But it's not the end of the world to say, hey, we're going to pull out, we're going to refactor, we're going to create a new branch here.
Back it out and make it up.
Yeah, we're going to roll auth from scratch. We're going to export, all of our current model data into our new, into our refactored, code where we're going to roll our own code. And it's an update or an upgrade process that you go through.
Sure.
Okay, well, we didn't get started on the app. I was hoping we would, but we, again, this was a process we were going to have to go through at some point anyway. So,
yeah, I think there's value add with exploring that devise gem. That was huge. I really appreciate that.
Cool, good. Okay, that is all. So you got you said your daughter's in town this weekend?
She just drove in.